Crimes of the Future feels like a movie you're probably gonna have to watch a few times to really understand, and I have no desire to watch it again. Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watch or Pass. Today I'm talking to you about Crimes of the Future, the new David Cronenberg film that comes to theaters on June 3rd, 2022. It has an all-star cast including Viggo Mortensen, Léa Seydoux, Kristen Stewart, and Scott Speedman. And my hot take is, I actually think you should pass on it. Look, it has moments of brilliance and a great cast, but it feels like a movie that you'll have to watch multiple times, and I really have no desire to do that. I didn't love the writing. It was a little slow. It had some esoteric concepts, and it really kind of had a flat tone throughout. It never really had many highs or lows. It was just kind of flat throughout. So I'm going to tell you a little more about the film, a few things I liked, a few things I didn't like, and then talk to you about the ending. So as you can imagine, there will be spoilers in this review, but I'll try to keep them to the ending portion. I think I can do that. I think I can keep everything mostly generic until then, but I would turn this off at the end if you don't want to know what happens. But hey, maybe you do, because I think I might have enjoyed this film more if I knew more about the film at the start. So in Crimes of the Future, you just have this kind of mysterious, feels almost like a post-apocalyptic kind of world where clearly something is going on in society. There's a lot of like hints that this is kind of post-apocalyptic, but it's not. But you have like, it starts with a scene where you have a rusting cruise ship just kind of like sitting in the ocean. You have a kid playing with like a rusted can and a spoon. It has a very interesting kind of like low-tech feel in a high-tech world. Like a lot of the technology feels scavenged together. So like the kid playing with the rusty can and the spoon, or there's a cell phone in it, but it's like one of those old school Zach Morris type cell phones. Or you'll have like some very high-tech surgery technology that feels very primitive. It has like a bone kind of look to it. Or you'll have this like advanced type of office that has all sorts of files in file folders. So, and as you kind of explore this world, you learn more about some of the things that have happened, and a lot of it involves kind of performance art, body modification, self-surgery. It's a very kind of strange overall structure, and as the film goes on, you do get more about what happens. You do kind of understand a little bit more about what's happening in this world. But like I said, it didn't really catch me, it didn't really grab me. It had a very slow pace to it and a very kind of flat overall feel, even though it deals with some fairly extreme topics. So at the start, I'll tell you right at the start, because it's like the first scene. You have that scene I described with the kid playing with the like rusted can and the spoon. And eventually his mother calls him in. And when he goes inside, he seems like a normal kid, but eventually you see him like in the bathroom, and he takes a like plastic waste bin and just starts like chomping on it. Like he'll take bites out of it, and as he's eating, there's this like white film around his mouth. So something seems odd. Like, I don't know, is the wastebasket edible? Is this kid just eating a wastebasket? Who knows? His mother sees this, and the next scene you see, she is like standing over the kid sleeping with a pillow, and she gets on top of the kid and smothers him with a pillow. You're like, what is going on? Which you say a lot in this movie. And then she calls her husband and says like, your monster is here. You can come get him if you want. So she like killed the kid and then called the dad and was like, come get your monster. And then we're introduced to Viggo Mortensen's character, Saul Tenser, who is like a performance artist. He like apparently grows organs, and then along with his partner Caprice, played by Léa Seydoux, cuts them out in very public displays and then displays these new organs prominently as part of this performance art. And there you go. That is your primer into Crimes of the Future. So things I liked about this movie. The first, as you can kind of tell, is the world building. This does feel like a very unique world. It feels both kind of high tech and low tech at the same time. You have some inclinations that society is kind of crumbling around. You have like some rusted technology. You have some high-tech things in very low-tech packages. Like I said, the cell phone. The surgery that Saul Tenser and Caprice perform is in this supposedly high-tech chair that feels very primitive. It looks like it's essentially a slab of stone with these like bone appendages coming up that move in a very janky kind of way that are performing the surgery. So they're doing some high-tech things, but in a very kind of low tech package. And it does feel like a very unique world. It feels like a world that is well developed and well thought out, even if I didn't really love spending time in it. The second thing I love is the cast. Look, like this is a great cast, and everyone kind of does give themselves into this movie. Like the performances are good there, or at least the performances are what I expect they were supposed to be. Everyone kind of fully buys into this world and this idea. So look, I liked the cast. I thought that they had interesting moments, even though I didn't love the film. I think the cast is great, and I think that they all, at least gave it their all. And the last thing I liked is there is some good writing. Like I didn't like the writing overall. It felt very like artsy and kind of unnecessarily trying to be heavy, but there are some moments that I really liked the writing. There's a scene towards the end where Saul Tenser, Viggo Mortensen's character, is having a conversation with someone, and they do get into some interesting topics, and that is kind of when the film starts to come together. So I really liked that scene, but up until that point, I didn't really love the writing. But there are some really good moments. All right, things I didn't like. The first thing I didn't like is I didn't like the writing. Like it didn't really catch me. It felt like it dealt with a lot of like concepts. It felt like it was talking about some big ideas, introduce topics and conversations that the audience wasn't really keyed into. I think this is why I kind of need to watch it again, because a lot of their conversation, I think it would make a lot more sense now that I know a little bit more about the world. But at the start, I didn't really know what was going on. So you were trying to listen to hear what these people were saying, but some of it was just information you hadn't been introduced to. Oftentimes, it also felt like very kind of theoretical and very kind of like big picture type of discussions, or very kind of like artsy discussions that just didn't really pull me in. So I didn't love the writing. It felt like it was a little bit too conceptual, and it didn't really kind of drive the story for me. The second thing I didn't like is the film is slow. It Not much happens, and like I said, the film has a kind of measured tone throughout. There are some big events that happen that, I don't know, film doesn't build for those. Like you'll have a scene where someone dies and it just like happens and then it's over, or you'll have a scene where like there's this big art aspect, and I don't know, the film doesn't really play with your emotions. It keeps like a measured tone throughout, and just overall the film feels like it moves at a very measured pace and doesn't really get your blood flowing at all, despite it dealing with some pretty heavy topics. And there are some thriller aspects in this film. There are some big exciting moments, so I felt like it could have at least tried to accelerate towards those moments, or tried to like build a bigger event for when those moments happened, and it didn't really do it. So I don't know. I think that was by design. I think a lot of this was by design. It just didn't do it for me. The third thing I didn't really like is, this is a tough one, because the film, I don't know, it feels pretentious. And I don't know if this was by design or if this was just kind of the way that it came off to me. But it's one of those things. Are you an art person? Do you like discussing art and discussing like high concepts? Then you might like this film. I didn't love that. A lot of this film felt like, commenting on society through the lens of like art. And part of that is you have Viggo Mortensen and Léa Seydoux characters doing performance art surgery. And the reason for that becomes clearer later. But at the start, you see these gatherings of people watching, Caprice cut out an organ, and you're like, why? Like, what's going on? The music had this like heavy tone. It didn't feel like it was earned. And overall, the film felt like it had this kind of like really high opinion of itself. And I just didn't like it. And so to me, it felt pretentious. Maybe someone else would like it. The fourth thing I didn't like is the film doesn't make much sense, at least until the end. And even then, when it happens, it still doesn't make a ton of sense, even though I kind of understand what was happening. I was just kind of confused throughout a lot of it. I was just kind of like left in the dark through a lot of it. And so when a lot of these big scenes happen at the start, you're like, I don't really know what's going on. I don't really know why people are so interested in this. And frankly, I didn't really care. And so that just didn't grab me, didn't make me excited to watch this film. And the last thing I didn't love are the effects. And I think, again, this is by design. I think David Cronenberg wanted to have like kind of play on this idea of like a high-tech future. And so he had these devices that had high-tech ideas but were very low-tech, but they didn't look that good to me. And I think maybe it was supposed to be funny, maybe it was supposed to be kind of like part of the overall aesthetic, but they just looked off. Like I said, you had this like chair, the surgery chair, It had essentially a slab of stone and these like bone surgery arms coming up to, both cut and then spread, but they moved in a very kind of janky way. So it didn't look high tech. It didn't look, impressive. It looked very kind of thrown together. I think, again, I think that was the point, but it didn't help me get into this world at all. Oh, there was also this like chair that was supposed to help people with digestion. And again, I think it was supposed to be by design, but it moved in a very kind of animatronic way. It looked ridiculous. I think it was supposed to be ridiculous, but when I first saw it, I was like, what is going on? Like, I don't really understand why this is interesting or why we care. Again, I think that was all by design, but it kind of had these big tentpole aspects of the film, and they just looked a little ridiculous to me. So now, I also didn't really love the ending, even though the ending did kind of help to clear up some of the things about the film. I didn't really love it, and I'm going to tell you a little more about the ending. Now, to get to the ending, I'm going to have to tell you more about what happens in the film, and so this might be a long one, so buckle up if you're interested. If you're not, I completely understand, but again, there will be spoilers in this as well. So, like I said, at the start, you have this kid who was eating plastic killed, and then you see Viggo Mortensen's character and Léa Seydoux' character performing surgery, and Viggo Mortensen is like growing organs, and you find out eventually that there is this government department, this like National Organ Registry, that is tracking new organs. I guess in this world, people are evolving at a more rapid pace, and the government, and by extension this office, is worried about the effect of that. They're worried that like people are evolving outside of the human path. Like they're essentially evolving so that they are no longer human and maybe there's something else. And the government and I guess society wants to keep people along the human path. So Viggo Mortensen's character is growing new organs, and so whenever he grows, when he goes to the like National Registry and they like, I guess, tattoo it, figure out, like, see the organ, tattoo it, catalog it, and then he cuts it out as part of his performance art. But what you do get some snippets of things that are happening, and what you find out is that the government's worried because people's evolution is kind of going unchecked. And so you have like they mentioned that people have evolved so that their pain receptors are almost non-existent, so people don't feel pain anymore. And also people have evolved so that they like no longer get sick, they don't no longer get like infected. And so one of the things that is a result of these two things is that people like tend to cut themselves just for, I guess, fun. I mean, I don't think they feel anything because their pain receptors are gone, but they don't get infected, so I guess they just do it out of boredom. And like the government is worried that maybe if this continues, people will evolve like outside of the norm, like evolve into something that's not human. You also find out that there's a lot of these kind of like art aspects, these art projects. And so like Saul Tenser is kind of a legend in this. He was the first person to like grow his own organ and then cut it out. And Caprice, his assistant, played by Léa Seydoux, has been with him the entire time. But there's other performance art that you see. There's one performance where like a person like sews his eyes and mouth cut shut and like attached a bunch of ears to his body and then was like dancing around. That was one of these like art installation things. Another was a beautiful like model essentially who like cut her face, like cut chunks out of her face, and she basically had like gills and like a ridged forehead. And she wanted to do that because I guess she, didn't want to be beautiful anymore. So you have things like this idea that like without pain, people are, I guess, going more extreme, trying to like one up each other and also like become more extreme in their art to, stand out from the crowd, I guess. And you also get some inclinations during these art installations that like people get sexual gratification from this, from like watching these body modifications. At one point someone says like surgery is the new sex, and so I guess the idea is that people, because they can't feel, like this is their new way of feeling. I don't know, I didn't really like that part of it, but there is this like body modification as sexual ecstasy aspect to this film. Later you also find out that this surgery table that Saul and Caprice use is this like amazing model of that this company put out. It's called the Sark, and I guess it was no longer used anymore. It's no longer made, but it's kind of like top of the line, amazing, very rare. You can think of it as like a, was it Stradivarius violin, something that would be like sought after and like revered if you found it. And so this table, the Sark, was originally an autopsy machine, and Caprice and Saul modified it to perform like surgery and do body modifications. And so you have this like, it's the same company that made this surgery table that also made this like janky robot chair thing, and also made Saul's bed that also looks really weird. It's like this bed that is supposed to adjust to his pain, and it has these like suction sensors that go on his body that it's supposed to like relieve his pain as he sleeps, but sometimes doesn't work because he's growing new organs. It's all really weird. But so eventually someone approaches Saul and says like, hey, you had that autopsy machine, would you like to do a real autopsy? And he's like, what? And this person's like, yeah, my son was special and I'd like you to do a real autopsy, so like the world can see what was so special about him. And Saul's like, why wouldn't you just go to the police? And this person was worried that the police might try to just cover it up and not let the public see what happened to his son. And this son was the kid at the start that was killed. And so his dad wants Saul and Caprice to like dissect him in public so that everyone can see what happened. And you eventually find out that, and so eventually you find out that this dad is part of like this body modification cult, and they all have done these surgeries to their body to allow themselves to eat plastic. Like they can eat plastic, they can digest plastic. They call it modern food. And hey, you know what? There's a lot of plastic. That doesn't seem like the worst idea in the world. And you know, plastic is durable. Hey, not a bad idea. But this dad and he has like I think 30 or 40 followers here who have all done that surgery, and they make these plastic bars and eat these plastic bars, and I guess maybe recruit others to make and eat these plastic bars. But these bars are like toxic to people. If someone else eats it, if a person who doesn't have this modification eats it, they will die. So you know, like, hey, it's a little bit of benefit, but not great for anyone else. The father says that there are people worldwide that are part of this overall movement, but his son Brecken was born like innately with the ability. So his dad had to like do surgery, but his son somehow was born just with this ability, and so he could eat plastic just naturally. And so this dad wants to perform this autopsy so the world can see like, look, he had this special gift. It's not something to be afraid of. It's something that can be natural, and you should all embrace it. You should embrace this like human evolution, because there is this theme throughout the film of like, you know, staying on the human path or like evolving further. And so Viggo's character Saul is like afraid of that. It seems like he grows organs naturally, and he's apparently like a really good at it. He grows organs all the time, but he always cuts them out. You know, I think in his mind, an organ without a purpose is a cancer. And so if he grows a new organ, he doesn't think like it has any use, so he cuts it out because he doesn't want to, I guess, embrace that. But the dad and people around him view this as like the body naturally evolving, like people naturally evolving. And maybe what Saul's doing is like artificially limiting the natural evolution, the natural beautiful evolution. Maybe he is becoming something greater, but he is so afraid of it, he's cutting it out of his body. That is one of the themes as well. So the dad wants to perform this autopsy to like show the world that this can happen. When they do eventually perform the surgery, they cut open Brecken, open him up, and inside his organs all look strange, and they all have like weird like graffiti on them, like dark tattoos, I guess. So it looks artificial. It doesn't look natural. It doesn't look beautiful. It looks man-made. When this happens, the dad like starts crying and runs out. So Caprice like starts saying like, you know, look, we like this, the ugliness, the cruelness of this world has seeped into our youth. Like, look at what it's done to our youth. Essentially kind of like propagandizing what happened to this kid. I couldn't tell if she was doing this like for the performance, like because she was in that art mode, or if she was part of like this group that didn't want people to evolve. But in any event, this causes a stir. The dad runs out crying, and he's crying outside when two of the techs who have been kind of throughout the film, they've been servicing these weird machines that look kind of low tech but are supposed to be high tech. So the autopsy techs like come out and they're talking to the dad, and he's like, why, why would she, and I think he's talking about Caprice, like do this to his kid? Like, why did she like modify his organs? And the autopsy techs are like, she didn't do it, but she would approve. And then they drill his face. They drill like the back of his head with like drills. Apparently no one walks around in this town because they just like kill him and brought like in out in the open. They drill his head and the dad dies. So there you go. That was that was what they did. So later Saul goes and talks to his like police contact. So Saul like seems to be informing the government all over. And so earlier he talked to like the organ registry people, but he'd also talked to his contact in Vice about things that were going on. And when he started to become close to this dad who was part of this like plastic eating cult, Vice wanted him to do more to infiltrate that cult. And he didn't really feel comfortable with it. Saul didn't really feel comfortable with it. But he's talking to Vice after, and they have this meeting. And he essentially says, like, why did you do that to this kid? Like, why did you set this up? And Vice says, they essentially didn't want this to come out. They switched out the organs earlier. And they were all like, when they opened them up, they were all natural, and they didn't want the world to see that. Again, Vice is like part of the machine, like the government side, that is trying to prevent people from like evolving too quickly. They want to keep them on the human path. So when they saw this kid who could eat plastic and it was all natural, they didn't like that. So they got someone to go in and change up the organs, deface them, I guess, make them look unnatural. And who that was? That was Kristen Stewart's character, Timlin. Timlin is a weird character. She has kind of like aspects of Kristen Stewart's performance as Princess Diana and Spencer. She has this like kind of strange area way of talking. And she also seems very obsessed with Saul because she was the one that went in and changed the organs. So not much that Saul can do. So the next thing we see is that Caprice is sleeping and having like a vivid dream or a nightmare. I can't really tell if she's like scared or aroused, maybe a little bit both. And she kind of wakes up and goes over and sees Saul sleeping on the ground outside of his chair. I don't know if he fell out of his chair or maybe he decided he didn't want to be in that chair anymore. I don't know. So he's sleeping on the ground. Caprice comes up and like talks to him and essentially is like, you were in pain. What was it like? Saul says physical pain becomes part of the dreaming, which mixes with the emotional pain of the dreaming. And then she asked, like, what were you dreaming about? And he was dreaming about doing like a family autopsy with Brecken and his father, and doing them all together. And Caprice is like, who was controlling the autopsy? Because with this machine, someone has to control it. And it's this like weird rubberized control thing that lights up. It's a very strange controller, but someone has to control it. And Saul says, you and I. So like him and Caprice were controlling it in his dream. And then they kiss. And then you see Caprice go and get one of these like purple plastic bars and the camera. And so she like starts recording Saul and basically says like, I think it's time that we try this. And Saul agrees. So he takes a bite and he's like, he's taking a bite in this like ridiculous chair that's moving around. And so when he takes the bite, it looks like he stops being in pain and the chair also stops moving. And then his face like kind of turns into one of ecstasy as he's eating this bar. So I can't tell at that point if he is like able to digest the plastic, and maybe this is like, Saul's body has been trying to change. Now he's finally embracing it. And now he is like embracing this next step of human evolution, or if the bar poisoned him and he is dead. And that's why the chair stopped moving. I don't think that that's the case, because there was a scene earlier where someone was killed in the chair and it was still moving even though they were dead. I think the chair is supposed to help you digest food. Like it's supposed to help you like move your body in a way that like lets you naturally digest the food. And again, it's kind of ridiculous. And I think the whole point is it's supposed to be ridiculous. But when he takes the bite of this bar, the chair stops moving, maybe because it no longer needs to help him digest the food. Like he is like, this is what he should have been eating the whole time. And this is part of why he's been so sick and part of why his body has been, I don't know, kind of like uncooperative throughout this. And now that he's finally like embraced eating this plastic, maybe he doesn't need the chair. Maybe he doesn't need any of that. Maybe now he's finally like embracing his future and finally allowing his body to like live. I don't know. Again, it was very weird, but it stops at his face in ecstasy. And that's the movie. That is Crimes of the Future. Oh, also, there was a scene where like Saul enters an inner beauty pageant, a pageant to like highlight organs in people, and in so doing he gets like a zipper attached to his stomach where he can like open it up so that they can see his new organs. And when he shows this to Caprice, Léa Seydoux' character, she like unzips it and starts like, I guess, goes down on his stomach gash. It's a strange movie. Like I said, I feel like I kind of have to watch this movie multiple times to really understand it, and I really don't want to. So this film has some very good aspects. Like the world building is interesting. There's some good writing, a great cast, and maybe someone that's more interested in these kind of concepts might like it. But and look, for me, I didn't like it. I don't want to watch it again, and I think it's a pass. So that is Crimes of the Future. It's coming to theaters on June 3rd, 2022. And thanks so much for watching. If you like this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.